So we're going to have a Q&A now, inshallah, where you get to ask, inshallah, whatever type of question related to the topic. So if you can try and keep it on topic, inshallah. So anything to do with atheism, evolution, science, etc. So ask your questions, inshallah, and be as open as you can. One of the things that Subboor mentioned is, if someone has a thought inside, the last thing you want to do is keep it suppressed. So let it out, inshallah, and it's an open platform. There's going to be more of a discussion type than a direct answer to the questions. So please, inshallah.
Sister can write the questions.
Sisters can write the questions and pass them down as well, inshallah.
Is there a link between man and chimp when they say because they have a 99% homology with DNA with chimps? So Darwinism, evolutionary biology says there is a link. There's a missing link. What's your take on that?
Okay, very good question. 2 or 3 different topics. One is 99% similarity between human beings and chimpanzees.
In the DNA?
Yeah.
The building blocks?
Yeah, DNA. So the first thing we need to realize is what they're basically doing is they're using the concept which is known as homology. Okay? Now, homology is the idea that similarities are due to common descent. Okay? Now, that's an assumption. And that particular assumption, no matter how much similarity you're going to show, that's still going to remain an assumption. So you can't use that to say it's absolutely true. You can say, under this assumption, we think it's probable. But there's also some other assumptions. So when someone says human beings and chimpanzees, they have a common ancestor, there's actually 3 assumptions they've made without realizing it. Sometimes we just regurgitate. The first assumption is similarities are due to common descent, which is an assumption. The second assumption is that there's only one origin, and human beings and everything else came through that origin. And the third assumption is there is a mechanism of transformation from A to B, which is natural selection. So there's 3 assumptions. So if someone wants to say, I believe in human chimp ancestry, I'll be like, fine. But as long as you understand it's based on these 3 assumptions. Also something else which is very important to realize. When they say 99% similarity, similarity itself is a very tricky thing. Okay? Similarity itself can tell you many different things. So Carl Linnaeus was the first guy who classified life the way it actually is. He existed about 150 years before Darwin, 100 years before Darwin. And he was a believer in God. He didn't believe in common ancestry, but he brought human beings and chimpanzees together because he said there's similarities. But he didn't say similarities are due to common descent. He just said they are similarities. The second point to take away is the assumption of homology, which is similarities are due to common descent. We know of a counterfactual to this assumption, which is known as homoplasy. They are similarities which are not due to common descent at a genetic level, biochemical level, anatomical level. And even the way they come up with 99%, you have to understand, it's the way you measure it and what you measure. Because if, we hear all the time 99% similarity between human beings and chimpanzees. Well, using the same method, which is a very limited method, where you don't compare the 2 entire sets of DNA, the 2 entire genomes. You take selective parts and you measure them in a selective way. That same method gives 98% similarity between human beings and mice. Okay? So it's a very speculative method. Also, according to some evolutionary biologists, which is, it's not a popular view, but it's the view of some of them, and these are again mainstream secular atheist biologists, they say it's not possible to do an objective analysis between human beings and chimpanzee genomes. They say whatever you do is bound to be subjective. It can't be objective because one genome is bigger than the other. There's huge differences in terms of insertions and deletions and other types of things. So what they say is, and there's actually a paper published on this, The Myth of 1%, by John Cohen and others, is published in the peer-reviewed journal Science. And they basically say this 1% is a myth, the 1% difference between human beings and chimpanzees. They say it's actually incredibly difficult to even come up with any percentage difference between the 2. Unless, of course, you make assumptions and you ignore certain parts and you focus on other parts. But for the sake of argument, even if we were to accept 99%, it still wouldn't mean common ancestry is true. Hope that answers the question. Okay. Yes?
So the alternative mechanisms which we have to natural selection, are they a naturalistic mechanism or do they require intelligence? Or intelligence?
Okay. Science only allows naturalistic mechanisms. Some people try to bring things like intelligent design and other sort of things. To be honest, I don't know much about intelligent design, so I don't want to say something, but I would say that science, as it stands today, only allows naturalistic explanations, which there's nothing wrong with that. Because even if you pick up the Quran, Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 67, and I'm sure, where's that brother? Where's your brother Moin? Is he here? Oh, he's gone. Anyway, I was going to get him to actually say the verse itself. Allah says, do you not see the birds up in the sky who are spreading and closing their wings? None holds them up except Allah. So there we have a phenomenon which has two explanations in the Quran. Allah says, do you not see the birds in the sky who are spreading and closing their wings, which is lift, which is release steering, which is aerodynamics, whatever you want to call it. So there's a causal relationship, there's a naturalistic explanation. But Allah also says, none holds them up except Allah. So that's a metaphysical explanation, that's a why explanation. Science explains how. The explanation that we as theists, we as Muslims use is a metaphysical, is a why. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ said, when a nation commits zina, Allah sends diseases which their forefathers have never heard of. And I'm sure for many of the elderly uncles here in the masjid, you know, in the 1930s, 40s, no one heard of HIV, gonorrhea, and all these things, right? So there's something the Prophet is saying. He's saying, when a nation commits zina, Allah sends disease. Now, look, there's a physical relationship. Zina is causing diseases. But who's sending the diseases? Allah. So in Islam, we believe, not only as Muslims, but any person, even if they're not Muslim, science explains how. The belief in God is a different type of explanation. It's a why explanation. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, the way he reconciled this, people get confused, but he gave a very simple analogy. He said, the world is an open book. Okay? It is an open book, you understand the world. And the Quran is also a book. One book is the word of Allah, it's the kalam of Allah, which is the speech of Allah, which is the Quran. And another, which is the open book, is also the speech of Allah, because Allah said, which is the world. These two things, they're compatible. If there seems to be a conflict, the conflict is either in our understanding of the Quran or our understanding of nature. But the way that science works, it only gives naturalistic explanation. So those things I put on the board, Neo-Lamarckian evolution, Mendelian mutationism, evolution by self-organization, evolution by natural genetic engineering, evolution by acquiring genomes, those five alternatives, those still can accommodate human chimpanzee in the tree of life. But the reason why I'm highlighting them is this. Imagine there's a bridge. You have this bridge and it's going over water. If the foundations break, can you cross the bridge? Does everyone get that analogy? If you have a bridge and you have foundations on either side, if the foundations break, can you cross? Yes or no? No. There's two aspects of Darwin's theory. One is the tree of life, which is the bridge. One is natural selection, which is the foundations. Darwin's theory of evolution is not a theory of similarity, it's a theory of transformation. If the bridges, if the foundations break, which is the mechanism, the tree of life breaks. These two are connected. So the reason why I show those five alternatives is something we've been taught is true, is you have to be a complete idiot to deny it. That's the sort of pressure they put on people. Why do they have five complete alternatives by atheist evolutionary biologists if it's so true, if it's absolutely true? So that's the only reason why I'm highlighting it, and I'm fully aware Darwinian evolution, just as incompatible it is with those different paradigms, I'm not saying one paradigm is better than another. I'm just saying others exist, which shows that what we've been taught is not true in terms of, this is a fact and this is true. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, great.
Excellent. Yes?
So at the beginning you said that if someone says, I believe in science, you have to say to them, can you prove how your great-great-grandmother existed? And then they'd say it's logic, and then you said that's not science. But then afterwards you said that logic comes under the banner of science, so technically wouldn't that be science?
Okay, let me put it another way. Think of my brain, right? There's 3 ways I know it. Innate, things we know innately, things we have no evidence for, but all human beings believe in things innately. Right and wrong, the world is real, there are other minds, yes? Then you have reason, logic, right? Then you have empiricism, senses. Science is a subcategory of reason and empiricism. So science is based on logic and maths. Science, you can't prove logic and maths using science. That's what I'm basically saying. Yeah? Understood?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier that evolution can be split into the tree of life or the web of life, and then random mutations and natural selection, right?
Yes.
Being the mechanism
But
of evolution.
Darwin wouldn't say the web of life. Darwin would say the tree of life.
Yeah, I just
Yep.
said it because you said that's a more appropriate way of calling it, right? The web of life.
No, it's not appropriate. The reason why I highlighted the web of life is to show you there's ikhtilaf. Not to say it's more appropriate, just to say there is ikhtilaf.
Okay. So the mechanism being random mutation. I hear that scientists have this term called speciation that has apparently living examples of random mutation creating a new species which is more adaptable, more survivable in this environment. And then they take that and they say, hey look, so we have an example of a mutation creating a better, more living creature, and that proves that therefore we can explain all of creation through these examples, these 4 or 5 examples. How would you respond to somebody who says that?
Okay, I don't really respond to that. All I would do is, and we all should do this, right? Especially the people who study this field. What are their assumptions when they say that? I know exactly what you're saying.
Right.
What are their assumptions when they say that?
Can you give me an
So
example?
what they basically say is, look at the peppered moth example. Look at Lenski's bacterial example. We have things which are mutating, there's mutations, random mutations, and they seem to be changing. And this small change over a large period of time would lead to the tree of life. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right. What are the assumptions they're making? Because they're actually making some assumptions.
That's sufficient to explain everything?
Yeah, of course, no, that's the claim they're making. What's the assumptions they're making?
That this was the cause of all life?
No, that's their conclusion. What is the assumptions they're making to come to that conclusion?
I'm not sure.
Okay, the first assumption is they are assuming there's one origin.
Yeah.
Okay? 2, they're assuming similarities in the biological world are due to common ancestry.
Right.
3, they're assuming that the changes that we see are due to natural selection and random mutations. So if somebody makes that claim, you can say to them, do you know what? Your claim makes sense. But you do have to realize it's based on 3 assumptions. So it's not proven, it's not true, it's not absolute. It still has these 3 assumptions which are unproven.
Is there anything to suggest that these assumptions may not be true? Do we have any?
Other evolutionary biologists would say yes.
Right.
They would say the tree of life doesn't make sense, the web of life makes sense, homology, homoplasy. They would say, like in the Royal Society just a few months ago, back in November, Gerard Muller, I hope I'm saying that right, I think it's like a German name. He's an atheist evolutionary biologist. He basically said during that Royal Society meeting in London, which is the oldest science society in the world, because they were in this society a top evolutionary biologists who were challenging Darwinism and others who were defending it. He basically said Darwin's theory can explain little small things, but it can't explain anything big. Okay? Now we as Muslims, we don't need to even go that deep. We don't need to disprove it scientifically. We don't need to do any of those things. All we need to do is this. We need to show to members of the public, when we come across people like this, that this is your perception of this theory, but this is the reality of it, according to secular mainstream academics. And just show them the discrepancy between the 2. That's what you need to do. Yes? Anybody who hasn't answered yet? Yes.
You said those three things that dispute Darwin's theory, and one was gradualism. So can you go a bit more in depth into what gradualism is?
Okay. And also something very, very important. I'm going to ask this to everyone. If something in science, you make a prediction in science and it comes false, does that mean your theory is false? Huh? Not necessarily. So Darwin made an assumption for his theory in his book, The Origin of Species, and he said, my theory will absolutely break down if things didn't evolve in gradual steps. Small, steady, incremental. Very, very small. Now, according to a huge, vast majority of fossil experts, paleontologists, gradualism is not seen in the fossil record. It's actually rapid change. Others still believe in gradualism. So that fundamental assumption is being challenged. Does that make sense? The fundamental assumption is being challenged. And also something very, very important, which is also why I have a lot of respect for Darwin as compared to people like Richard Dawkins and others, is right in the beginning of The Origin of Species, he says, you can use the same evidence that I've used, you can use the same thing, about biogeography, fossils, whatever. You can use all of that data that I have used to come up with my theory. You can come up with a theory which is opposite to mine. He says this in Origin of Species, which is the scatter graph problem. But he says, I still think my theory is largely correct. Which shows you he was not like the people today. I believe if he was alive today, he would totally disagree with most of what's going on in evolutionary biology in terms of not the secular academics, but the way it's being used as a bargaining sort of chip for atheism and as a sort of sledgehammer against religion. Darwin would have disagreed with that. I think he would have completely disagreed with that. Any other questions? Yes?
Are there parts of evolution that as Muslims we can believe in?
Sorry?
Are there parts of evolution that as Muslims we can believe in?
Okay, before I answer your question, I need to make something very, very clear. Science gives you knowledge which is always, at best, probabilistic. Always. Okay? What we as Muslims believe is do I believe in Allah because it's probable Allah exists? Do I believe in the Quran because it's probable that this is the word of God? No. We believe it to be certain. That's why the foundations of science will only give you at best something which is tentative. Which is why philosophers of science, mainstream philosophers of science, people who study how scientists come to conclusions, they say no scientific theory, because remember the scientific theory is the highest thing you can achieve in science. No scientific theory is written in stone. Any scientific conclusion, any scientific theory can be overturned. So, to answer your question, before I answer the question, the Quran says certain things about natural phenomena. Will science always be in line with the Quran? No. Does it have to be in line with the Quran? No. 70 years ago, the prevalent theory in cosmology was the static state model. The universe is eternal. The universe has always existed. Einstein believed in this, and everybody else believed in this. There was a consensus that the universe has no beginning, and it existed even in general relativity. Einstein's theory, he accommodated for that. What does the Quran say about the beginning of the universe? Does it have a beginning? What did the scientists say 70 years ago? There's no beginning. What would you have done as a Muslim 70 years ago? What would you have done? Yeah. But you would also say, I can accept your scientific theory of the eternal universe, I can accept it as a valid scientific theory. I just don't accept it to be absolutely true. Because science always has the problem of induction and the problem of the scatter graph problem, the Lax-1 problem. Later on we discovered that that particular model wasn't correct and we replaced it with the Big Bang model. Right? The universe has a beginning. And now people say, look at the Quran, look at the Big Bang, therefore the Quran has a scientific miracle, this type of stuff, right? There's loads of problems with that, so let's not get into that. 50 years from now, they could reject the Big Bang and they could believe in the eternal universe again. So we don't have to always try and get the Quran to match science. Science keeps changing. Okay, in regards to your question, it's a very good question. I'm not going to say from my own understanding, because, I have no authority to speak about the Quran, but what I will say is that according to some commentators, there are similarities between what Darwin proposed and what certain things in the Quran. Some commentators have said that. There are overlaps. For example, Darwin assumed life began in water, right? And the Quran speaks about water. Some commentators speak about change. Allah adds to His creation, Allah subtracts from His creation. And other people speak about, that's what also Darwin came up with. I've read some stuff on this. I think some of it is inferiority complex, that we feel so much pressure, so we start reading into the Quran. Some of it, I think, is interesting. I think is interesting because, again, we were talking about how there's things similar to us in nature, which we're not related to. One of them, we are supposed to be the common ancestor we are supposed to have a recent common ancestor with the chimpanzee, yet, in terms of parts of the body that we want to subtract, and heart valves, it's actually the pig, right? We can actually take parts of them and put them inside us, and in fact, before we had synthetic insulin, we used to extract it from the pig and inject that in human beings. We didn't do that from chimpanzees. And there's quite a lot of similarities between human beings and chimpanzees, which is why there's an alternative to the standard human-chimp ancestry. It's called the pig-chimp hybrid. That a pig mated with a chimp and it created the human line. It's a separate theory they have, right? Now, some people take that and then they take the Quranic verse, Allah changed a nation into pigs and apes, right? And then they say, look, there's a correlation. What I would say is, look, there's no need for any of this. The simplest thing to actually do is to accept it as a scientifically valid theory, explain to them why we believe the Quran to also have weight, and also understand that the position which I'm explaining to you today is not a unique position. It's not a position which was just made up a few months ago. Secular mainstream academics who are atheists, like David Stove, like Jerry Fodor, like these philosophers of science, they also say Darwin's theory is the best scientific model we have, it's the best scientific theory we have, but they say it's not absolutely true because of other reasons. Yeah? So that's my best way of trying to speak about evolution and the Quran.
Bro, can I say something? There was something very, very interesting, right? Because I heard a lecture recently and he was saying that atheism is an overreaction to the oppression of the church that happened in the Dark Ages. And evolution is pushed more, in the political arena now than ever before. What comments do you have on evolution and its influence of secular democracy and etc. and a lot of kind of the push on politics and the making evolution mainstream in the curriculum, etc.
Okay, the first thing which I wanted to say, which I forgot to add to Amjad's question. I myself used to be one of those people who used to read the Quran and evolution together, right? Used to try and merge the two, try and come up with something. So I just wanted to admit that it's a mistake I've made in the past. It's good to always know that you have to change your opinions. But back to your question. All I can say is I don't want to say anything from my own perspective, because it's very dangerous when you, especially come on a platform like this, you're speaking in a masjid, you're speaking to Muslims, it's being recorded, you say something and then it sounds like an Islamic opinion. So I'm not going to say anything of my own opinion, I'm only going to say what mainstream secular historians have said about Darwin's theory. What they basically said is, Darwin got his theory from a book about capitalism, essentially. Right? And when Darwin proposed his theory, it took off, not because of its scientific merit initially, it took off because it dovetailed with the British Empire. Right? general relativity works everywhere in the universe except in High Wycombe and inside Wise Mosque, what would you say?
Crazy.
You say you're crazy. Thank you. I wanted a frank answer, so you gave me a frank answer. So, if I say general relativity works everywhere except in High Wycombe, inside Wise Mosque, I'd be crazy. Darwin's theory of evolution, for those who believe it to be true, you can't say it's true for everything in nature, but it's not true for human beings. Right? If that's the case, then some human beings have to be better evolved than others. Some have to be superior to others. Which is why we got the out of Africa theory. That human beings left Africa, and in Africa we have the great apes, and the most primitive human beings, in Darwin's words, the Negroes, were in Africa. And Darwin wrote a lot about this in The Descent of Man, which is one of his lesser known works. He speaks about the civilized races, which for him were the Caucasians, the whites. They are in the future going to wipe out the savage races, the blacks, the Indians, and whatnot. And the interesting thing, why he said this, North America, who were being wiped out? Aborigines. Aborigines ended up in human zoos as missing evolutionary links. Most people don't know this. Okay, what was happening in Australia?
Same thing.
Same thing. Did you know? Same thing. Australian Aborigines were used as missing links, and their skulls were sent over for study because they were seen as missing links. Okay, what was happening in Africa? Black people were being enslaved also. There was slave trade, that's fine. What else was happening in Africa? Genocide. Genocide. Okay? Some of the Africans, they were captured and they were put inside human zoos like Ochabanga, who was taken from Congo, and he was studied as a missing link between the grey apes and the white man. So between the grey apes and the white man, you had this particular guy. And, we still have pictures of people like this. Now, what's really interesting is this hierarchy of racism, this idea, according to a new book which was just been published a few years ago by an atheist evolutionary biologist, Yuval Harari. He's an Israeli evolutionary biologist, and he basically says Darwin's racism and that scientific racism and all the research that was being done about how the blacks are inferior and how the whites are superior in terms of IQ and all of this, eugenics, killing off the lesser known, the savage races, all of this ended with World War II. And he says in his book, which you can get from Amazon, right? He says in his book, it didn't end because of any scientific reasons. It ended because of what Hitler did, which is natural selection. Stalin, for example, one of the biggest dictators, one of the most cruel dictators of the last 100 years, how many people did he kill? Anyone know? Huh? For those of us like me and Amjad who are old enough to remember the Soviet Union, how many people did Stalin kill? You'd have to have some white hair like me and him to know what the Soviet Union did.
40 million, including people he started?
We're talking about millions, tens of millions. Okay, now those tens of millions of people that he killed, according to his own biographer, number one, he became an atheist after reading The Origin of Species. Number two, he believed he was applying Darwin's theory of evolution to social class, which is why he believed he was justified by nature to kill other people. Okay? So it's some very scary stuff. Now it's very, very interesting. They whitewash this from history. They try and take it out. But they still believe, and we still have, and if you go online you can actually find this. If you go to the IRA channel, I've done another talk where I actually talk about this. 6 types of human beings. You have the white, the Asian, Chinese, going down to the black. The difference between the black and the ape was 1 step. The difference between the black man and the white man was 5 steps. Right? And Darwin, in The Descent of Man, he laid out the framework which justified much of the genocide. His son, Leonard Darwin, was the president of the Eugenics Society in the UK. Eugenics is about killing off what Hitler basically did. And he said one of the most difficult questions we're going to face in the future is what to do with the savage races. What's interesting as well is that you might think you know, like some of us here who are a bit more lighter skinned or, you know, Turkish or whatever, you might think, we'll get away, we're Caucasians. Actually, you're not, because Darwin, when the Ottoman Muslims, the Turks, when they were fighting against the Europeans, they lost in a battle. So Darwin said, the reason why these savage Ottomans lost is because they're inferior race. So even though Turks are quite fair-skinned, they still weren't pure Caucasian. So even their loss in battle was supposed to be because of Darwin's theory of natural selection. So you're absolutely right. There's a whole historical reasons why this theory took off. In fact, according to let me try and think. According to Jerry Fodor, who's an atheist philosopher of science, he's got this book called What Darwin Got Wrong, right? Very well-known guy. He wrote this book with another atheist scientist. And in that book, they say, in our field of philosophy and science, you have to pledge your bay'ah, you have to pledge your allegiance to Darwinism, whether you understand it or not. And they don't believe in it, they reject it. But they said, this is how it's come to. And you will not find, and I'm going to throw this out as a challenge, Darwin's theory of evolution is the only scientific theory in history which has laws to protect it being taught, which has international treaties which Muslim countries have to teach it in their schools, which became into a political system, an ethical system, which became into a religious system, and also a theory which led to people losing their jobs who are secular, mainstream academics, purely for questioning it. Find a theory in the history of science where you question it and you lose your job. Also, one other thing, if that's not bad enough, find a theory in the history of science which has the amount of forgeries that Darwin's theory has, where they've been caught red-handed taking the skull of a human being, taking the skull of an orangutan, putting it together and using it for decades in central London in the museum. It's known as Piltdown, right? So that's my challenge, and you're absolutely right, Shoaib. There's a whole historical context to this. Yes.
My question is two parts. Number one, do you think this trend of atheism will come to an end? And secondly, for those people who are born in as Muslims, who may be going down this path, how do we catch that? How do we stop it early? Because I've certainly noticed, especially within university. How do we stop that?
Okay, very good question. A few years ago, I sat down with Dr. Zubair Ashraf. Some of you might know him. He's a scholar in Pakistan. He's Dr. Farhad Hashmi's husband. And I was complaining to him exactly like you are about this whole issue, about the rise of secularism, the rise of atheism, people being affected by it. And it's a sociological thing. It's not a logical thing. It's literally like social proof. You know, people, there's two kebab shops, a whole bunch of people are gathered around one, another one, no one's there, everyone wants to go to that one. It's purely a sociological thing, right? So I was explaining to him and I was complaining to him, and the great thing about the people of knowledge is that they'll give you a perspective that you never thought of, right? And they'll give you that. And he said to me in Urdu, he said to me, you know, like, son, don't worry. He says, we've been going 1400 years and we're strong. This is nothing. Yeah, just don't worry about it. And wallahi, first I used to be really worried. I was like, no, we need to educate our youth, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. But what I believe is that this rise is a means by which Allah wants us to become intellectually superior, so then we can actually advance Islam. And I think that's the way it's actually going to go. Because if you look at there was times in our history where Islam technically, logically could have ended. One of those times was actually during the Mongols, right? Now I want to ask you guys this question. If you have a country, and this country has a capital which is a garrison city, which has fortifications, which has army, military, satellites, everything, and say that capital is destroyed and taken over, and then there's a small village which is about 20 miles away. If you've taken the capital, can you not take the small village? Of course you can. Hulugu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, he sacked Baghdad, killed 1 million Muslims, threw all our books into the river Euphrates. He absolutely destroyed us. And that was the capital of the Muslims. What stopped him from going to destroy Makkah and Medina? Because Makkah and Medina were small, harmless cities which did not have defenses. Yet he is the only person in history, the Mongols are the only people in history who managed to get into a Muslim country, take down the Khalifa and murder the Khalifa. It's never happened in our history that an invading force did that. And when I read this, it shook me. Because I read this from, not from Muslim sources, but from non-Muslim sources. What stopped Hulugu Khan when he destroyed the Muslims in Baghdad? He could have gone straight to Medina. It's not that far. He didn't even need to go to Damascus. And they even occupied Damascus, as you know. Why didn't they destroy Medina and Makkah when Hulugu Khan wanted to destroy them? This is very important to understand.
Didn't he send an envoy to Cairo to the king of Egypt at the time, saying, surrender or we will overrun you? And the king just killed the envoy of Hulugu Khan, and then there was some death in the family of Genghis Khan, and Hulugu Khan had to go back.
There's other historical things that happened, but that's irrelevant to what I'm saying right now, which is they were in Baghdad, they destroyed the Muslims, they could have gone straight out.
Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Of course, but what happened?
Same as the elephant.
Yeah. In Bukhara, which is the city of Imam Bukhari, Burq Khan, who was the first cousin of Hulugu Khan, who was a mushrik, as he was traveling through the city, he met a sheikh. And the sheikh gave him da'wah, while the Mongols had conquered the area. There and then, Burq Khan, a mushrik, became a mu'min. He became a believer. When he became a believer, he told his entire army, who were known as the Blue Horde, you become Muslim. When he discovered that Hulugu Khan has killed the Khalifa, he swore by Allah he's going to take revenge, and he used his army to attack his own cousin. And that's why Makkah and Medina was protected. One dawah conversation led to one conversion, led to an army's conversion, led to the first civil war amongst the Mongols, which protected Makkah and Medina. So this religion is strong. Don't worry about the rise of atheism, the rise of secularism. The only thing that we need to understand is this. Allah makes a promise in the Quran. And Allah makes this promise in the Quran 3 times. Not once, 3 times. Anyone want to guess what that promise is? And it's actually one of the verses where Sheikh Ahmad Didat said, you need to take this verse, you need to stick it in your head, you need to memorize it, and you need to use this as a driving force. No. That's good too, but that's not it. 3 times. And it's in Surah Muhammad. And the other 2 times I'm trying to remember where it was. It is He who is sent. It is He who sent His messenger with guidance in the religion of truth, so that it may prevail over all systems, all deens, and enough is Allah as a witness. You know, when I read this verse, I think to myself, the question really is, are you going to be a part of that happening, or are you going to watch it happen? Because that's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. I myself, just yesterday, one of my friends, he was an atheist for 15 years. He was a militant atheist. You know, what I'm coming up with now, if he came here and he told you all the stuff he knew, right? Militant atheist for 15 years. What happened? And I want you guys to understand this. You know, during the Battle of the Trench, the Muslims were surrounded. Okay? One man, he went over the trench, he was a mushrik, and he became a Muslim. He went over and he said to the Prophet, I became Muslim, what shall I do? The Prophet said, go back and do something. So he sowed discord, which led to the tribes disappearing. Do you know what that man said? He said, that night, Allah threw Iman into my heart. Just threw Iman into my heart. And my friend who I was talking to you about, Same thing. Militant atheists for 15 years. No God, fairy tales, we came here, we have a common ancestor with chimpanzees, religion is all nonsense. Militant atheist. Yet if you speak to him how he became Muslim, it's just, Allah just throws Iman in your heart. So, when we look at these things, we shouldn't be on the defensive. We should be on the offensive. We should be learning these types of content. And obviously, one thing which I have to say, which is extremely important, some people, they watch our videos, they watch particular Speaker's Corner videos, they watch debates, they get excited, they go pick up a book on philosophy, they go pick up a book on evolutionary biology, and they think that let me go out and debate someone. This is not the way to do it. Absolutely not the way to do it. What's the first book you need to read? Quran. I remember somebody who's very enthusiastic about dawah. He said to Abdurrahim Green, tell me what book I need to read, what book I need to read on philosophy, what book I need to read on biology, whatever, so that I can, take on atheism, take on this, take on that. Abdurrahim said to him, read the Quran in a language you understand, from beginning to end. When you finish reading it, go back to the beginning. When you finish reading it, go back to the beginning. Because that's the framework from which you see the world. You have to, very, very importantly, before you get involved in dawah, you have to have knowledge. And sometimes, some of the people who I know who got involved in dawah, they only got involved in dawah because somebody put a doubt in their head, then they had to learn their own religion, then they had to learn the arguments of the others, and then they had to oppose. So they started on a defense, and then they went on an offense. And that's what I would highly recommend, that everyone in this room, if you're not having a constant connection with the Quran, then you're someone who's bound to go into some sort of doubt. You're someone who's bound to get into some sort of trouble. Because that is the foundation from which you look at the world. Yes? Any other questions? Yes.
I remember reading some verse in the Quran where some of our generations from the past thousands of years were not able to understand a book like the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them messengers, but they were not fully. So does that mean that the human species itself is evolving in some ways to be able to understand things more complicated?
I don't know. And that's a dangerous topic for me to talk about. I'm not sure about that. You'd have to ask, that's...
Is there a verse of the Quran then that says that, the people of the past were not able to understand the message?
I know what you're saying, and I know where you're coming from, and what you're actually referring to, but that's not something I can answer. Yes?
But a question about going back to you saying you were reading evolution in the Quran at the same time. So I think we have a number of young people here that that have studied philosophy, for example, looking at videos of evolution. What is your advice? I know you covered it a few minutes ago, but what is your advice for them to actually tackle this particular?
Well, the first thing I would say, for every single Muslim, they have to study Aqidah. The reason why, it sounds like a cliche, it sounds like it's an old record, people say you need to study Aqidah, they need to study Aqidah. Why? Because when you study Aqidah, one of the things that you actually realize is we don't believe in Allah because of some probabilistic argument. We don't believe in Allah because of some, miracle or whatever. We believe in Allah fundamentally because it's fitrah, right? And it's natural. And we also understand that human knowledge at best is a pixel. And Allah has the picture. And when you start on those assumptions, that look, remember, every single worldview starts on assumptions. Today, when they teach philosophy, they're not actually teaching philosophy. They're not. You may go to Philosophy 101, they're not teaching philosophy. They're actually teaching a particular type of Western skepticism. That's what they're actually teaching. Philosophy just means way of thinking, right? Thinking about thinking. The Quran has its own type of philosophy, which starts off by the fitrah, right? So what we need to do is we need to understand our own belief, our own aqidah, our own tradition before we look at someone else's. Because one of the most dangerous things which can actually happen is when you debate someone, you step over the line and you step into their paradigm and you accept their assumptions. And that can be very dangerous. And many people, I know somebody who started studying philosophy and then said, I don't believe in fitrah. I believe in Allah because it's rational. You can't say that. Allah speaks about the fitrah in the Quran. And a lot of this is because of an inferiority complex. Yeah? We want to be. Did you know, this is very, very important, which nation are we going to copy? And who? Who in particular? Bani Israel. Do you know Bani Israel, one of the things that they used to do and they still do, they used to take their Torah, not read it, wrap it up in silk cloth and put it in high places. Did you know that? Guess who else does that? Did you know they had a huge inferiority complex with the Greeks? Because the Greeks were superior intellectually, philosophically, scientifically, so the Jews felt inferior to the point where they would undo their own circumcision. Look this up. They would try to undo their own circumcision because they wanted to follow the Greeks. Right? We as Muslims, we look at the Western world, we look at their scientific technology, we look at this, we look at that, and we have such an inferiority complex, we just try and follow them. But the reality is this. Muslims have been on this, we've been here since the beginning of time, but from the time of our last Prophet ﷺ till now, we were either the superpower or one of the superpowers. We were at the forefront of science, philosophy, mathematics, everything. Yes, we're having a slump right now, but that doesn't mean we follow them. Right? And this is where it's very, very important. So before, and this is something very, very important for everyone here, before you get excited and think, let me go and debate an atheist, let me learn some of these arguments and go refute them, let me do this, let me do that. First, learn your own religion. If you don't, you will go on the slippery path that others have gone in the past, and you'll start denying qadr. You'll start coming up with other sort of nonsense. Yeah? So this is the most important thing. Any other questions?
Last evolution question. One of the
I've got time, by the way. For Shuaib has got me here after a long time.
This kid over there sleeping, so I thought, you know, make it quick. So one of the reasons evolutionists, I find they're so confident, is because they say that the theory has the power to make predictions.
Yep.
So like say they have a tree of life and they think there should be a species here, then they find a fossil and it goes exactly where they think it should have gone. So they say, or like they say that the chimpanzee and the man has a common ancestor, but we're missing a chromosome if we had a common ancestor. And when they search, they find that chromosome. They go, see, we told you. Like, for me, I find that quite powerful, that they can make predictions and it keeps, you know, being correct. And I'd feel a bit naive to kind of dismiss that and say, okay, you're based on assumptions, so I don't want to really address that. As a Muslim, I'd like to have some sort of an answer to that.
Okay, any scientific theory has predictive power. Any scientific theory, but it doesn't make it absolute.
Sure.